The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 300,000 years. 12 species sat at the Great Table, each believing themselves the pinnacle of evolution. They had mapped every corner of known space. They had every dead civilization, every fallen empire, every species that had risen and crumbled to dust. Among their records was a simple entry about a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. The entry read, Earth, species, human, status, extinct. Cause unknown stellar event. Time of extinction, approximately 1 million years ago. The council members rarely thought about humans. They were just another failed species in a galaxy full of forgotten names. The records showed they had been primitive creatures, barely reaching the stars before their sun had destabilized and swallowed there. Some historians noted they had been unusually aggressive. Others pointed out their short and fragile bodies. Most simply shrugged and moved on to more interesting topics. Ambassador of the species was attending a routine border patrol meeting when the first reports came in. A sensor station at the edge of known space had detected something impossible. A massive energy signature was emerging from the void between galaxies. The void was empty. Everyone knew this. Nothing existed in that black emptiness between the great spirals of stars. Nothing could survive there. Yet something was coming through. The Galactic Council assembled in emergency session for the first time in 10,000 years. Holographic displays showed the approaching signature. It was not one object. It was thousands, tens of thousands. The energy readings were unlike anything in their databases. The ships, if they were ships, were moving at speeds that should have been impossible. They crossed distances in hours that would take Council vessels months to traverse. High Counselor of the demanded answers. The science teams had none to give. They could only watch as the signature grew closer. Some council members suggested preparing defenses. Others argued for sending a diplomatic envoy. A few whispered about ancient weapons hidden in forgotten vaults, but before any decision could be made, the fleet arrived. It emerged from darkness like a tide of metal and light. The ships were enormous beyond comprehension. The smallest was larger than any space station the Council had ever built. The largest measurement. Sensors could not find where it ended. Each vessel was and battered, marked by damage from battles and journeys that spanned unimaginable distances. Yet they moved with perfect precision, arranging themselves in a formation that spoke of ancient discipline. And then they spoke. The transmission came on every frequency simultaneously. It bypassed encryption. It ignored jamming. It simply appeared in every communication system across the galaxy. The language was strange at first, then shifted, adapting in real time until the words became clear. This is Admiral Helena Vance of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. We left our home 1 million years ago when we saw our sun would die. We have traveled through the void between galaxies. We have crossed distances that have no names. We are returning to reclaim our place among the stars. We come in peace, but we will not be. The council chamber fell into absolute silence. A was the first to recover. She accessed the ancient archives with trembling fingers. The human entry was there, unchanged for 1 million years, extinct, cause unknown. But the records also contained something else, buried in a forgotten subsection. A note from a long-dead archivist who had studied human history before their sun destabilized. The note was brief. This species built their first flying machine and landed on their moon within the same century. Recommend monitoring for rapid advancement potential. The humans had seen their death coming. 1 million years ago, when the other species of that era were still learning to build fire or crawl from their oceans, humanity had looked at their dying sun and refused to accept their fate. They had built ships, impossible ships, ships designed not for years or centuries, but for millions of years of travel through the empty void. They had loaded their civilization onto these vessels and launched themselves into the darkness between galaxies, aiming for distant shores they could only imagine. And they had survived. Admiral Vance's fleet held position as the council debated what to do. Some members demanded immediate military response. The species known for their conquest of 17 worlds argued that no civilization could be trusted after a million years of isolation. They had to strike first. Others disagreed. The philosophers and peacekeepers pointed out that the humans had announced peaceful intentions. Attacking without cause would violate every principle the Council claimed to uphold. While the Council argued, something unexpected happened. A small vessel departed from the human fleet and approached Council space. It was tiny compared to the massive warships, barely larger than a shuttle. It crossed the defensive perimeter without hesitation, ignoring the weapons that tracked its path. The ship landed directly on the Council's capital world, settling in the plaza before the Great Chamber. The doors opened. A human stepped out. She was tall by human standards, though the records showed their species had always been small compared to most Council races. Her hair was silver, and her eyes held a weight that spoke of years beyond counting. She wore a simple uniform marked with symbols that had no meaning to the Council observers. She walked toward the chamber entrance alone, unarmed, unhurried. Guards moved to intercept her. She stopped and looked at them without fear. Her voice carried clearly in the sudden silence. "I am Helena Vance. I have crossed 1,000,000 years and the space between galaxies to stand here. I would like to speak with your leaders." The guards hesitated. Their commanders hesitated. Finally, High Counselor himself gave the order to let her pass. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was respect. Perhaps it was simply the understanding that weapons meant nothing when facing someone who had survived a journey beyond comprehension. Admiral Vance walked into the Council chamber. 12 species watched as she approached the central platform. She looked around at the assembled representatives, at the floating displays showing her fleet, at the ancient symbols of authority that decorated the walls. Then she spoke. "My people left Earth when we learned our sun would kill us. We had perhaps 500 years to prepare. In that time we built these ships. We developed technologies that would allow us to survive indefinitely. We placed our civilization in stasis, with rotating crews maintaining the fleet across the. We lost many ships in the void. We lost more to accidents and failures. We lost some to despair and madness. But we never stopped moving forward." She paused, her eyes moving across the Council members. "We did not know what we would find when we returned. We hoped other species might have risen. We hoped the galaxy would be full of life and culture and knowledge. We are pleased to see our hopes were not in vain, but we want to be clear about something. We did not survive 1,000,000 years of darkness to be pushed aside. We did not cross the void between galaxies to be treated as relics or curiosities. We are humanity. We have earned our place among the stars." The Council had no response prepared. They had protocols for first contact with primitive species. They had procedures for dealing with aggressive civilizations. They had guidelines for welcoming new members and managing disputes. But they had nothing for this. They had no framework for addressing a species that had been declared extinct 1,000,000 years ago, a species that had solved problems the Council's greatest minds still struggled to understand. I found herself stepping forward. Her voice was steady despite her racing thoughts. "Admiral Vance, we welcome humanity's return. We have many questions." Vance smiled. It was a small expression, barely visible, but it carried warmth. "We have answers. We also have knowledge, technologies we developed during our journey, medical advances, energy systems, materials that can withstand conditions you have never encountered. We are willing to share. We ask only for fair treatment and a place to call home." The negotiations that followed would reshape the galaxy. Humanity's technologies were beyond anything the Council had imagined. Their ships were not simply large. They were mobile ecosystems, self-sustaining worlds that had supported millions of humans across the ages. Their power sources drew energy from the fabric of space itself. Their medical science could extend life indefinitely without the degradation that plagued other species. Their understanding of physics included principles the Council had never discovered. But more impressive than their technology was their spirit. 1 million years of travel had not broken humanity. They had maintained their culture, their art, their music, their stories. They had written libraries of new literature during the journey. They had composed symphonies inspired by the light of distant galaxies. They had raised generations who had never known any home but the fleet, yet who still dreamed of blue skies and green forests. They eventually demanded a demonstration of human military capability. They refused to accept that any species could be as advanced as humanity claimed. Admiral Vance agreed to a controlled exercise. A single human destroyer faced 12 warships in a simulated battle zone. The exercise lasted 43 seconds. The human ship moved like nothing the Council had ever seen. It was everywhere and nowhere, striking from angles that should have been impossible, dodging attacks before they were even fired. When it was over, all 12 vessels had been disabled without a single human shot striking a fatal system. The message was clear. Humanity could have destroyed them. They chose not to. The delegation, their objections. In the years that followed, humanity spread across the galaxy. They settled new worlds, built new cities, and shared their knowledge freely. They joined the Council as equals, eventually becoming its most influential members. They never forgot their million-year journey. They built monuments to the ships that had been lost, to the generations that had lived and died in the void. They taught their children about Earth, about the blue planet that had given them life before the sun took it away. And somewhere in the Council archives, a researcher quietly updated the human entry. Species, human, status, active, notes. They were never just another species. They never accepted extinction. They never gave up. Perhaps that is what makes them human. The galaxy had thought humans were gone forever, lost to time and the death of their star. They had been wrong. Humanity had simply been traveling, crossing the darkness between worlds, waiting for the moment they could step back into the light. And now that they had returned, the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Helena Vance stood on the observation deck of her flagship, looking out at the stars she had spent 1 million years reaching. Behind her was a galaxy full of life and wonder and possibility. Before her was the future, unlimited and bright. She smiled, feeling the weight of ages lifting from her shoulders. They had made it. After everything, after all the sacrifice and loss and endless darkness, humanity had made it home. The void between galaxies had tested them. Time itself had tried to erase them. Neither had succeeded, because humans did not simply accept their fate. They fought for it across any distance, through any darkness, for as long as it took. That was the truth the galaxy was learning. That was the legacy of the million-year journey. Humanity endured. Humanity adapted. Humanity survived. And humanity had finally come home.